Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are the Guardian sports writer Jonathan New and the chief football writer for the Telegraph, Sam Wallace. Welcome along to you both. We'll hear from you very shortly, gents, just after we've run through the Back Pages as we have them so far. So, the I newspaper covers Leicester's latest defeat with the headline Rude Rage. There are also stories on Mo Salah, Marcus Rashford and supposed lack of preparation for England ahead of this winter's Ashes. Back page of The Express covers a story we've been bringing you around Manchester City's legal challenge from LaLiga. And also, that's at the top, there's also to cover talk of changes on the way, at Arsenal. The Sun's back page leads on that City legal story. Javier Tebas, the president of La Liga, making serious claims about some of their practices. But as we've been reporting, City refute those allegations. They say that their accounts tell their own story. And Manchester United's issues are on the back page of The Star. Imposters, the headline there. Roy Keane going in front foot in his criticism of the team that continues to struggle for any sort of form. All right, so welcome once again to Jonathan and to Sam. Let's start off with Manchester City. We're going to go to the Telegraph first. Man City accused of Enron-style scandal. La Liga head Tebas reveals European Commission probe. Premier League clubs strongly deny financial improprieties. I wonder, Sam, for those who perhaps didn't follow the Enron scandal at the time or maybe don't know about it, I wonder if you can just unpack that reference and give us your take on this story.
Well, David, I certainly wouldn't claim to be an expert on the Enron scandal, but from what I understand it's the moving around of money to different parts of the corporation and concealment. So it's a very, very strong allegation from Tebas. I mean, he is a very outspoken football executive. What he's talking about, I think, is in reference to the case that City actually won in the end. Well, they certainly overturned a large part of it, which was the UEFA case against them. That was heard in 2020, both the verdict, and then the appeal at the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Tebas is referring, in terms of his complaint, to something he says was submitted by Liga in 2023. So that's completely separate to any other cases that are running at the moment. But from the point of view of, obviously, Real Madrid and Barcelona, who themselves were at loggerheads with Tebas, and that's far too complicated to go into now. Clearly, they're the two remaining Super League rebels. They're very unhappy that Manchester City, who were going to be banned from the Champions League for 2 years when they originally lost that UEFA case, they were going to be fined €30 million. The ban was wiped out on appeal. The fine went from 30 million to 10 million, and a lot of the original verdict was struck out. I don't think the Spanish clubs have ever quite gone over that. What Tebas is talking about here in very colourful terms is a completely separate complaint, I presume under European law. It's not quite clear how the progress of that case, but as is his way, he is very outspoken. We've got a lot of football executives in this country who tend to err on the side of discretion. That's not Tebas's approach. He goes for it, and he's certainly grabbed the headlines today.
Yeah, and for context on, I mean, thank you for that, Sam, and also for context on Javier Tebas. I mean, I've interviewed him myself in these kind of settings before, especially when I presented Spanish football here at Sky, and he always takes the opportunity when he has a stage like that, and he shoots from the hip. And, you know, he's had a go at Manchester City before, he's had a go at PSG before, what he considers state-owned clubs. Let me go to the quote as we have it in the Telegraph piece. It's sort of midway through Tom Morgan's piece, Jonathan. Says, talking about Manchester City, they have a group of companies outside of City Football Group. They saddle all their expenses to these companies. For example, they have scouting or marketing companies who accrue high expenses. They invoice Manchester City for low amounts. It allows Manchester City to have a structure that circumvents the rules. We've reported Manchester City to the EU. Even though they are an English team and not part of the EU, they still have commercial activities in Europe. So first thing to say again here is that City refute these allegations completely. But what do you make of the tone of Javier Tebas on this occasion? And just, again, as I mentioned, that sort of, it's not that much, it's outspoken, it's just spoken. It's what we're used to from Tebas, isn't it?
Yeah, and also, like, a long history of being outspoken against City. I think go back as far as 2017, 2018, he was talking about the City Girona deal and he quotes cooking the books or something like that in terms of what City were doing with the Girona deal, which suggests that certainly he's got much more expensive lawyers than any of us have got. I don't have a copy of like EU competition law to hand, so I can't really speak to the legality or otherwise of this complaint. Obviously, what he's doing is opening up a new conversation about state ownership and multi-club ownership. And my first reaction to that would be if a multi-club ownership model is not there to kind of save overheads in certain areas, then why are you even doing it? So in terms of what he's trying to do with this, I think he's obviously, as Sam mentioned, at loggerheads with the two big LaLiga clubs. He's been had a kind of a bone to pick with City for many years, but he's not actually really managed to get anywhere with any of his entreaties. He is very outspoken in the media. He is whenever there was a microphone, he is kind of making incendiary statements. But I think the fact that he's kind of giving juicy quotes to UK newspaper journalists is actually a sign of how little he's been able to achieve in this matter, and quite the opposite of the power and the influence that he would like to portray.
When we think about the overall context, and again, it's worth just stating this is a very separate situation to the other case which is active involving Manchester City against the Premier League, and again in that scenario, also Manchester City, claim they've done nothing wrong. But this is yet another case of Manchester City and accusations and wanting sanctions and filing complaints. This is just the ongoing narrative, isn't it, Sam? And we already know that they're sort of underperforming on the pitch this season. This is just their leitmotif, isn't it? It's the thing that they're now being more readily associated with than any other club.
Oh, there's no doubt that if we refer to the separate legal battles, of which there are a couple of fronts opened with the Premier League, there's obviously the case which is sort of colloquially referred to as the 115 charges. It's actually more than that. And then there's the arbitration hearings that have come recently on the associated party transaction rules, which are separate, certainly in legal terms, but it doesn't have to look too far to see the connections between the two. This is the most monumental legal battle in the history of British sport. I mean, I would hesitate to say it's just English football. I mean, there's never been anything like it in terms of the stakes. The stakes are so high. I mean, we occasionally refer to City as a nation-state club. The club themselves say no, they're privately owned by Sheikh Mansour. Others have disagreed with that. They say that the two are indivisible, but those are the two sides of that argument. But clearly, this has huge implications for Abu Dhabi, for its relationship with the British government, I would say too, and clearly the shape of the Premier League. So yes, there's a great deal at stake here. We're talking about the rules when we talk about APTs. We're talking about the rules that underpin the Premier League's financial controls. It's so-called financial fair play. If they're removed, do we even have a financial fair play PSR system in existence? So it's enormous, and City are clearly, as has been many times, they are not going to stop in this legal battle. They feel as you said, David, they deny all the charges, and they are sort of pushing on another front now with the APTs. We're awaiting another judgment on whether the current rules, which were amended in November, whether the panel that oversaw, and I realise that there may be some people drifting off to sleep at this point, but the panel that oversaw that original tribunal hearing have got to decide whether the current amended rules are enforceable. So that's the next chapter. That will be soon, and it just goes on and on.
Listen, I appreciate the little sort of footnote there, but it's important to step these things out. These are complex legal cases, Sam, and listen, it's important to have the full context there. Don't worry about sending our viewers off to sleep. Let's talk football, shall we? Yes, let's do that. There was a game on tonight at the London Stadium. West Ham beating Leicester by 2-0. Is there any way back for Leicester City, Jonathan Liu? We can see here Thomas Tuchel scoring the opening goal, Jarrett Bowen scoring the second, and they are, what is it now, 5 points adrift of safety with 11 games to play.
Well, I mean, mathematically, you would say they still have to play, I think, most of the teams around them, and 5 points in 16 games is not an unassailable margin by any means. But I think like the evidence of what we've seen from them, certainly in the last 2 or 3 games, certainly tonight, suggests there's a kind of deafness behind the eyes there. I think we've talked about Leicester's problems in a lot of depth on this show. I think they go back to decisions made, like not just this season, but going back 4 or 5 years in terms of recruitment, in terms of finances. And, Ruud van Nistelrooy is not responsible for any of that stuff. But what he is responsible is for the attitude and the application of the team, the players that he sends out. And I didn't see that from them tonight. I didn't see a team that were 5 points off 17th place and fighting to stay in the league. I just didn't see that kind of that effort or desire or hunger. People talk about the product, the Premier League being a product. Did the Leicester fans, like thousands of them who travelled down to London on a Thursday night, what kind of product did they get from their team tonight? Yeah, it's quite sad.
Conversely, Sam, for West Ham, obviously they've got that big win for as far as they're concerned, Graham Potter at Arsenal. Backed it up with this result here. Is that corner turned? Now we can see, them start to build properly under Graham Potter?
I think Potter's done the hard early stages, hasn't he? He's won games. I can't say for sure, but it seems that he's got the West Ham fans behind him, which is so crucial for managers when they come in early. And West Ham will no doubt look back on his appointment with a great degree of satisfaction. Certainly from this viewpoint. I mean, I can't believe Leicester will say the same about Van Nistelrooy. I thought the players were dreadful, especially in the first half, but they weren't actually in the relegation zone when Steve Cooper was sacked. So if you look at managerial appointments, I mean, David Moyes has been sensational at Everton. Ruben Amorim has been much worse at Manchester United. So if you look at the fortunes of changing managers this season, clearly United believe that in the long term, Amorim has, once his system is implemented properly, that he will be a successful manager. I don't know how Leicester are justifying the decision at the moment with Van Nistelrooy. I think it's been very, very poor, and it looks like they're going down.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That those teams that you mentioned, Everton in 16th place, 32 points, and then the 3 teams above them, West Ham, Manchester United, Tottenham, all on 33 points, and those all bunched up in this part of the table. It just looks odd, doesn't it? A couple of seasons ago, that they would all have been in the, well, maybe not Everton, but, West Ham certainly had that run to 7th, didn't they, under David Moyes? They'd all be in the top half of the table. But, things have changed. At least, Everton have righted their wrongs, and it looks like West Ham are starting to go in the right direction. I just sort of wonder, if you are Graham Potter, Jonathan Liu, what is the reasonable expectation from here on in? Is it top 10 finish? The thinking here that it could get something as high as that, or is it just simply let's stay up and just change the way that our football is played to then move in the next seasons?
Well, obviously they're going to stay up. I don't think they're in that kind of trouble anymore. And given the way that the table is kind of weirdly bunched around that sort of 9th to 16th kind of area, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that they could put a run together. They could sneak into the top half. I don't know if I think probably like a European challenge is going to be beyond them at this point. But I think what you mentioned about having his ideas, Potter's ideas, take some kind of route. He's already, I think it's 8 games he's been in charge. You see a vision of how Graham Potter's West Ham wants to play the end of this season, next season, with possession, with aggression, playing attractive football as well, working hard for each other. The way that he's got, he's unlocked, levels in players like Aaron Wan-Bissaka or Todibo or even Souček tonight, a player that I think a lot of West Ham fans would have thought, if he'd been moved on in the summer, they might not have mourned him too lightly. He's managed to gel this group of players quite quickly, I think, and that has always been his strength. He gets players to coalesce around a certain idea. He works out what makes them tick, and he can do that quite quickly. So yeah, I mean, it's looking quite good. I don't know if there's a specific target for him this season. I think he just wants to carry on making the progress that they've been making.
Well, they are starting to make that progress now. OK, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of these sports stories in the morning's newspapers, including this. In the Mirror, Bruno torn to shreds. It says Keane lays into Fernandes and brands United's struggling stars imposters. That's coming up in a couple of minutes. You're watching Back Pages tonight. Welcome back to you at home. Welcome back to The Guardian sports writer Jonathan New and The Telegraph's chief football writer Sam Wallace. OK, Manchester United, the gift that keeps on giving. We're heading to the Mirror, and once again comments from one of their former players in Roy Keane, laying into Manchester United, it says in David McDonald's piece, and into his star, Bruno Fernandes and his Old Trafford teammates labelling them imposters. Right, Sam, where are we at with this? Because, you know, we've seen this completely inconsistent form with Manchester United, and yet Bruno Fernandes has been, you know, behind a lot of assists and a lot of goals for Manchester United in the recent past, even though their form has been up and down. So how do you see it?
Well, I don't think it matters how I see it. I think it's all about how Roy Keane sees it, and he's definitely not having that argument that that Bruno Fernandes has saved United. I mean, it was a pretty astonishing debate, and I suppose it's the kind of premium football content that every podcast is reaching for. But Keane is kind of like the sort of the protector of the flame at United. He stands, I think, amongst the supporters for everything that was good about that era. He joined in '93, didn't he, after the first Premier League title, and he's such a famous player because not just because of what he did on the pitch, because of his personality as well. And it was such a kind of impassioned debate with Ian Wright, and I could see where Ian Wright was coming from, because when you watch United, I was at Goodison on Saturday. Fernandes is clearly their most talented player. He is the best signing by a long way of the post-Ferguson era, and I think he probably would have got in a few of those Ferguson teams. He's certainly the only one at the moment that would have done. So Ian Wright was forming a pretty reasonable argument, but I'm afraid that the years have passed, and Keane has just seen enough of this team and of Bruno in particular. It's funny because years ago they used to say about the old the Liverpool teams of the 90s and the noughties that there were far too many famous ex-Liverpool players working in punditry, people like Alan Hansen and Mark Lawrenson, who were talking about the old days. But that's nothing compared to the number of former Manchester United players who won Premier League titles now talking about the current generation. And it just goes on and on and on. And there's plenty of them on Sky as well. So I think for the United players, the weight of history is pretty heavy indeed. Yeah.
We heard from Keane not so long ago. Wayne Rooney as well, weighing in with his views on his former club. Imposters, Jonathan, what do you make of that particular term? Yeah,
with it, I guess it's implication of, you know, fraudulence, the fact that he's almost, you know, stealing a wage, he's cheating the club. Of all the players, of all the United players, I'm playing the game now because, you know, this is the cycle of opinions and whatever. A man says thing on podcasts, and then, you know, newspaper prints thing that man said, and then TV show debates thing that newspaper said, and now but like of all the players at United to pick on, somebody like Bruno Fernandes, who has, I think, carried this club at times, certainly carried certain of his teammates when things have been really down in the doldrums for them, who has adapted, who has shifted, who has adapted his game to a litany of new coaches coming through like a revolving door. And yeah, I think this is the part of the job that certainly Amorim underestimated. I think a lot of United managers do when they come in. The fact that, like, in my email inbox, usually it's more the spam inbox these days. It's like some email from a betting website. Louis Saha says this. Philip Mulrine has some opinion about Diogo Dalot. Like, what, you know, David Bellion thinks that, you know, the current team wouldn't play with his kids' team today. You know, it's just this constant economy of opinions and opinions and opinions on Manchester United, which then have to be dissected like they're serious opinions, like they are worthy of our time. And I'm sorry, I've taken up about 2 minutes of your time with all this, but it's a game that we all play, right? But I don't. Does it help Manchester United win football matches? I don't think so.
That's the point of the entire ramble there. So if you'd like to comment on social media about what Jonathan New has said, about what a newspaper has said, about what's said in the podcast, please feel free to and continue the cycle. Let's move on to Arsenal, shall we? Back page of the Express. Let me just quickly find that. There we are. Someone's going to go. There it is. Martinelli or Trossard facing exit to fund Arteta shake-up. John Cross writing, friend of the show, Mikel Arteta could have to sacrifice one of his big guns to fund a summer rebuild at Arsenal. Right players to go, Sam, if this is true?
Well, I'm sure if Crossy thinks this is happening, then I would put my hat on it. I think that I think in terms of those two, let's see. I mean, they've both been starters at different times this season, and clearly, in the brave new world of PSR, where even the biggest clubs have to trade, and Arsenal have made losses. I mean, nothing like on the scale of Manchester United, but they have made losses over the last couple of years. Then that PSR compliance is a little bit, and you can't spend as freely as perhaps clubs would have done in the past. Actually, look, I mean, clearly there's certain players that there's absolutely no way Arsenal would sell. I mean, they would never wish to sell Saka. They would never wish to sell Odegaard. But I think it's having to think creatively about who you can do without, and sometimes having to grit your teeth and sell a player that you'd rather keep because you've got to sign someone else, and you feel that that's it's a close decision. I think that's quite a good thing for football in many respects. I think it encourages clubs not to hoard players. As for these two themselves, they're clearly very good players, and they would be useful to another club, and clubs have to marshal their assets like that now. That's the way it works in football. So I think in 10 years ago you would have been surprised to hear that two players who have been starters for Arsenal might be considered at a relatively young age dispensable, but game's changed.
Jonathan, you have exactly 45 seconds to give me your next answer, having spent 2 minutes talking about people making comments. Back page of the Mirror. Title won, no chance, says Virgil. Now, does Virgil van Dijk really think they haven't won the title? Or is he being a little bit cute with that and just being a statesman-like captain, saying, look, they might sing that, we don't think that?
No, I really think that he doesn't think they've won the title. And I think you can't let that thinking creep in. I think part of being a successful sports team, and actually quite a lot of unsuccessful sports teams, is that the capability to almost self-delude, to convince yourself that nothing is ever won until the final kick of the final, blow of the referee. And we know that that's not true, because we see things won before the end all the time. But I think when you're in an elite sports team, you almost kind of have to have that mentality. You have to nurture that. Nothing is, we fight for everything. And Liverpool this season have been incredibly good, especially in periods where it seemed like a little bit of complacency might set in. They've won a lot of the games where you might not have expected them to.
We're going to have to call it a day there, guys, I'm afraid. Jonathan and Sam, thank you very much indeed.